Welcome to worship at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene, where empowered by love, we transform ourselves and serve the world. My name is Reverend Lois Van Leer, she, her, hers, and it's my pleasure this week to lead worship with Suzanne Giordano, our collaborative pianist, and our newest staff person working tech behind the scenes, Kat Johnson. Also, a warm welcome to board member Ryan Doppelmayr. This morning, via the magic of technology, we are welcoming to our pulpit the Reverend Jill McAllister, minister of our UU congregation in Corvallis. Jill will begin the exploration of this month's theme, Beloved Community. One of the teachings of this time of living in the COVID pandemic is that we have really understood that we have need of one another, that we need to be connected. We need to find ways to be in one another's presence, even if it is only virtual, even if it's only phone to phone. We need to be connected. Yes, through phone, emails, letters, cards. We need there to be a church, a community to return to so that we can gather again physically in our building. So this morning, I don't want us to recite any litany of despair or outrage. Rather, I want to remind you, even if this is your first time with us, of the vital importance of the circle of our chalice, the circle of our community. I want to welcome all of you with the words from a song that reminds us metaphorically of who we are and why we are. The song is Circle Round by Freedom by Linda Hirshhorn, and the words are simple. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace. For all of us imprisoned, circle for release. Circle for the planet, circle for each soul. For the children of our children, keep the circle whole. Welcome to the circle. Welcome to worship. Some announcements. Faith Forward, session 3 is happening Monday at 7. And the topic is a virtual campus tour. If you're missing our building, or if you've never been in it, come for the guided slideshow of the property and our people. And you can find the connection, once again, in our newsletter, The Weekly Connections. The Compassionate Connection Circle, which is led by our lay pastoral associates, is moving from right after church to Thursdays at 7. So it doesn't start this week. It starts next week, I believe. Yeah, next week. So mark your calendars, and it's kind of a drop-in, say what's on your heart and mind into a very safe space where your words and your joys and your sorrows are held and witnessed. For those of you who are new to us today, please, please, please take some time to fill out the visitor survey that is in the chat. It is just being dropped in there right now. Want to remind you that the Challenging Racism group meets today. Brian, is it at 11:45? Can you tell me?
At 11:30.
11:30, thank you. And again, the link for that meeting will be in the Weekly Connections newsletter. There is another event happening today that some of us might not care about, but unfortunately I do. It's the Super Bowl. And so the Common Read, which usually happens at 7 on the first Sunday of the month, will happen at 8 tonight. It is a review of the New York Times sort of year in review. And once again, the link to that is in our newsletter. And I want to offer yet another warm welcome to our board member at large, Ryan Doppelmayr.
Hello, hello, good morning. It's so good to be with you today. My name is Ryan Doppelmayr. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm a member at large on your Board of Trustees. I am here to invite you to the board social hour, which is happening on Friday evening from 6 to 7 here on Zoom. The board will be holding these Zoom events every second Friday of the month. And it's just a great opportunity to visit, ask questions that you may be wondering about, and perhaps answer a U trivia question or two. There's going to be a link on the church website and in the Weekly Connections. And while I'm here, I also wanted to mention the Unitarian Universalist Association New Day Rising Conference. That's a mouthful, but I just signed up for it and I'm really excited, and I hope you'll join me or think about it. It's going to be on Zoom Saturday, February 27th from 9 to 6. Youths from all over the country will be meeting to focus on dismantling white supremacy and working towards racial equity in Unitarian Universalism. There's going to be a worship and lots of great workshops. And if you're interested in signing up, there's info in the weekly connections there too. Thank you for listening and for being here this morning.
Good morning. I'm Jill McAllister. I'm the minister at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Corvallis. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm very glad to join you for worship this morning. We light the chalice this morning, the symbol of our heritage, the symbol of our call to stay on the journey, using words that were written by the Reverend Bill Sinkford, minister of the First Unitarian Church in Portland, Oregon, and adapted for use by us this morning. The chalice we light is a beacon, a reminder of all that lies before us. The light of this chalice encourages us to continue, to keep moving, to keep learning, for there is much to do. We have only begun to imagine justice and mercy. May the light of this chalice help us stay focused on a vision of what can be. May it open our hearts to more stories, to more truth. May we see the hope in our history, and may we find courage and voice to work for that constant rebirth of freedom and justice.
Our call to worship is from Elizabeth Tarbox. And so I say ours is a story of faith, hope, and love. I say it is our need for one another that binds us together, that keeps us laughing and limping into relationships, and keeps us at it when otherwise we might despair at the fix we are in. And I say there is a transcendent value worthy of our loyalty upon which we may set our hearts. And its divine manifestation is love.
Words by the dear late co-moderator of our Unitarian Universalist Association, comrade and friend of many, Elandria Williams. We grew up at Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church together, and E was always quick to remind me that they had had my back since they had been my youth group chaperone a million years ago. As an ancestor, they continue to have so many of our backs. May we have theirs as we honor their legacy and vision. E's words, we are community. The history and legacy of Unitarian Universalism are shaped as much by Emerson, Foz, and Channing as it is by the ancestors in our congregations. We come to it through different avenues, the internet, an invitation, reading the Transcendentalists, or as babies or little kids. I came as a fourth grader to my congregation, the Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church in Knoxville, Tennessee. This community helped bring me into social justice struggles in the world around me and inside the UUA. They brought me as a child to the place where I now work, the Highlander Center. My church opened so many doors because they held young people in high esteem and encouraged our leadership in the church and community. I will never forget going to our district's Journey Toward Wholeness Transformation team meeting, the UUA's anti-racism program, and realizing that I was the youngest person there by nearly 15 years. My religious education teachers, friends' parents, and spirit aunts and uncles were and still are community leaders in everything from nuclear disarmament to anti-racism and anti-oppression issues. They protested US military involvement in Central America and stood behind the parent of a classmate as she transitioned from male to female in the early 90s. They have been my inspiration as I work to support others who are called by their faith to change hearts, minds, and communities. My church changed forever on July 27, 2008, when an armed man came into the sanctuary and killed 2 Unitarian Universalist leaders, one a member of TVUUC and the other a member of Westside Church. This rocked our church to its core. When I first heard about it, I didn't know who'd been killed. My mom, my friends, and their parents, or others who had nurtured me my entire life. I realized something that day that has stayed with me ever since. No matter what issues I have with other Unitarian Universalists regarding our visions of God, spirit, justice, race, age, at the root of everything is community, love, faith. That day, something larger than our individual beliefs rose up in my mind. I thought of the principles, values, and family that are the connective tissue of our faith community that held us for weeks after the shooting. 6 months later, on our 60th anniversary, and still today, I am part of the connective tissue that holds the legacy and future of our faith. I am Church Across the Street, AYS, Why Are You You, Youth Cons, Journey Toward Wholeness, Groundwork, CUUN, The Mountain, and GA Youth and Young Adult Caucus. We are the children of freedom fighters, visionaries, and radical liberal theologians. We are the phoenix rising out of the ashes of the McCarthy era and the civil rights, women's, and queer liberation movements. We are the survivors and beneficiaries of youth-led, youth-focused beliefs and programming that encouraged us to be change makers, boundary pushers, and institutionalists at the same time. We are and will be the ministers, religious educators, congregational presidents, organizers, and social change leaders our faith has led us to be. We wear our faith as tattoos on our bodies and in our hearts, as testaments to the blood, tears, dreams, and inspirations of our community ancestors and elders. The words of Valandria Williams. And these 30 days of love, these days we need those words, we need their ancestorship, and they are with us. We are community.
I'm glad to have a chance to talk with you today, to talk with myself again, to share with you some musings on the idea of beloved community. It is a phrase, it is an idea that's popular, has become more popular, especially within UU circles over the past years. And it is a beautiful idea, but I don't think we're there yet. In fact, I'm quite sure we're not there yet. And I wonder whether simply using the phrase is helpful or not helpful to our actually being able to get there. I think that we need to understand a little bit more about what we mean when we say beloved community and what it requires to actually build, create, nurture, and maintain beloved community. So what is it? Where did it come from, this idea? A white American philosopher and theologian, Josiah Royce, you probably know some of this, a person who founded the Fellowship of Reconciliation, originated the term. in the early 20th century. And then it was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was a member of the Fellowship of Reconciliation, who made this term more well known and gave it some broader and deeper meanings. King envisioned the beloved community as a society based on justice, equal opportunity, and love of one's fellow beings. It also described, especially for King and for others who worked, especially in the American Civil Rights Movement in the 60s, the 50s and 60s. It described a society in which all are embraced and none discriminated against. All are embraced and none are discriminated against. That is clearly an ideal, a tall order, especially now, especially now. A few weeks ago, I imagine you watched, millions and millions of us in this country watched the inauguration of a new president after several years that were not only unsettling, but destructive and dangerous, and came to sort of an apex in the weeks even following the election, before and after the election and the inauguration. We heard in that inauguration ceremony from several people and sense that this democracy, this society that we hold as an ideal and that we've described over generation, this democracy is still an experiment. It has never fully come true. It has never been a place of liberty and justice for all. Never yet. And so it remains to us in our generation to continue to build and strengthen it, but to build toward the ideal that it holds and that we hold. The beautiful poet Amanda Gorman, in her inaugural poem, The Hill We Climb, used this line, more or less, history is watching us. It is up to us. There is work that is now ours to do. And I would say this ideal of beloved community is part of that work, and is the part of the work we can do in our own religious communities as a microcosm of practice. I was just reading in the Atlantic Journal, of which I read a lot, a review of a special issue that was produced more than a year ago. The title of that special issue was How to Stop a Civil War. And the editor said, wow, we think maybe we would like to just publish this again, because even more than a year ago, the things that we were worried about, well, so many of them came to fruition. They said, when making this issue more than a year ago, we asked ourselves whether that concept was over the top. But the events since Election Day, worsening disinformation, charges of sedition, incitement of insurrection, violent mobs, and uncertain calls for unity and healing, those were the things we were preoccupied by. Now is not 1861, but the understanding, the need to understand our divisions and the sources of our divisions and whether they can be bridged is urgent. To build beloved community is not just something nice and sweet that makes us or could make us feel good about ourselves. In fact, when we use it as a phrase, that sounds so beautiful, as if this is who we are, it becomes a little more problematic. It has never been more needed, but we are not there yet, and we need to understand why. I'll just say to begin with that I have been guest in and preached in and worked in many congregations who have thought of themselves as beloved communities. At least some people in those congregations have thought of themselves as a beloved community because they have experienced in that congregation what feels like beloved community to them. Welcome, support, nurturing for growth, for new ideas, for moving on the spiritual path, connecting with others, finding ways to work together for justice in ways that have impact. Many, many Unitarian Universalists have experienced this in their own congregations, but not everyone. Not everyone. There's always an inner circle. There are always many circles. There are some who who hold so closely the welfare of the congregation and feel so responsible for it. And there are widening circles of people getting out to circles of people who wonder if they will ever be allowed to be part of. There are always many circles. And to the extent that there are inner circles and sub-inner circles and outer circles of people on the margins, some who are classically and traditionally marginalized, and some who simply feel that they are not welcomed in, to the extent that those margins exist, we are not a beloved community. And when those who have experienced it use that language, oh, we are such a beautiful, wonderful family, we all feel it, it is such a beloved community. When that kind of language is used, those on the margins feel it even more deeply, that this is not beloved community for them. Why am I not part of it? Why do I not feel like it? Why am I not welcomed in? So I think that it's a danger for us on our way to becoming a beloved community to claim that we are there without hearing from, understanding those who are on the margins and do not feel like they can yet be part of. This is part of the tension that's going on in the UUA right now, and it has been for years. The talk of being welcoming, especially to people of color and other marginalized communities in our nation, and the walk of not being so welcoming, of living in and being structured by the cultural norms of a white-dominated society. This is the tension. It exists among us, between us, in every congregation and in the wider UUA. And so I think that in order for us to become a beloved community, we need to sit down with ourselves, take a deep breath, and recognize that this is work we need to do. There are skills we need to learn. Beloved community will not just descend upon us. It will not just happen when we say the words. It is an action idea. It's similar to the way that I think about ethical living. Ethical living has been one of the high ideals of Unitarian Universalism for a very, very long time. True, we have used it as a way to sort of separate ourselves from people who believe things that we don't think are believable. There's a little bit of arrogance in that. We can live ethically without believing in silly old ideas, like some ideas of God, for example. We can live ethically. But I've come to understand that as one person, I cannot simply claim to be ethical. Ethical is a term which refers to the nature of a relationship. It has to do with right relations, at the very least between two people. And so I cannot claim to you to say, I'm an ethical person, and have that be fully true, unless you can say back to me, in your relationship to me, yes, you are ethical. Ethical living is a measure of the state of a relationship. And so I think that beloved community is ethical living writ large. And to claim it, we need to be able to hear from everyone who has entered the circle, who wants to enter the circle, whether or not we are accomplishing it, and in what ways we are, and in what ways we are not. So I think that there are skills that we can learn. If we couldn't learn these things, if we couldn't grow and change, there's no chance that we will ever get better than we are. It's all a process of learning. A month or so ago, the congregations in Corvallis and Eugene, we did a joint training in intercultural competency, multicultural awareness. And we learned in that workshop of the many specific kinds of awareness and skills that we need to get better at in order to navigate difference. Beloved community describes a community in which differences are seen, heard, known, understood, valued, and there's a way to compromise for the common good. All of those things have to be happening. So how do we go about building a beloved community? Here are some of the skills that I can identify that I work on a lot. To begin with, one that is so common, and that is listening. Listening more. Listening in a way that you can hear and say when someone says to you something that challenges you, that you can hear and say, oh, tell me more, or let me think about that for a minute. Listening in a way that is not immediately pushing back or justifying or standing ground or drawing a line or trying to make oneself feel good, because often to be presented with something which doesn't feel good, which someone is saying to you, wait a minute, I don't think you're doing this quite well. It doesn't make me feel good. When we're presented with that, we want to quickly backpedal and say, no, I didn't mean it. This is why. And we immediately justify. Instead, we could learn to welcome other perspectives with the idea that there may be something there for us to learn. There may be, not absolutely, but there may be. And so listening with real curiosity, instead of the first need to justify, real curiosity out of a commitment to an idea that when we share more of our truths, what is true for each other, we all learn more. So listening more. We could practice that, and we will practice that for the rest of our lives. Another step that I think we really need to work on, this is one that I'm taking seriously in my own life, is learning to apologize better. Learning to apologize. This is how we will eventually come to be able to have accountability for our actions and to begin to mend and repair harm when it is done. And plenty of harm is done between us. We hurt each other intentionally, not so often, unintentionally, very often. People get hurt for not being heard, for being misunderstood, for being accused, for being talked about. We hurt each other. That's what happens in human community. And I think in our culture, in Unitarian Universalist culture, at least in the congregations I've been active in, we have not done a good job of apologizing. We haven't talked much about it. We haven't trained in it. We haven't taught it to our kids. We haven't taught it to ourselves. We know it's needed sometimes, but it always feels humiliating, the need to apologize. Until we can see learning to apologize as not humiliating, but as a chance to learn more, move closer to right relations, and mend hurts so that we can build new, better structures. Until we can do that, we are stuck. We are stuck in bad feelings and hurt feelings. I've been trying to think and talk with folks in my congregation about something I learned or heard from from YRUU culture, the youth culture in our UU congregations. I heard once, or maybe I saw, I can't remember, that in youth meetings, when there's talking and interacting going on, if somebody's feelings get hurt, they are allowed to, they're encouraged to say, ouch, raise their hands, ouch, stop the process, ouch. And everyone has agreed ahead of time, when someone says, ouch, we don't just keep going, we pause. We let the person say what that ouch feels like, where it is, what happened. And then we try to come to an understanding that can either clear up a misunderstanding, or someone can accept responsibility. Oh, I'm sorry, I said that, I wasn't thinking. Or, oh, I'm sorry, I said that, I didn't mean that. I'm sorry it hurt you. But all of these dynamics, which sound familiar to us intellectually, but which we just don't have very much practice in as adults. The ouch project. One of the ways I've been learning about this, in the training for multicultural awareness, we look at this as the difference between our intent and the impacts of our action. What we intend and the impact. Intent does not equal impact most of the time. So much of what we do, we think is unintentional until we learn to stop even doing those things. But one of my teachers has been my youngest child, who is a sensitive person and had sensibilities, as a young child. And I learned sometimes from him, he would say when we were having what I call an intense discussion, he would say, Mama, can we just stop? Can we just stop? And let's start over later. And I thought, okay, I heard him in that. And I learned to practice that. But I also learned more when he was in his 20s, when he was beginning to review his childhood and assign some responsibility, a lot of it to his parents, when he said, you were always yelling at me. And I was shocked. And I said, I truly remember raising my voice only as many times as I can count on my fingers, because I know I tried not to raise my voice. I wasn't yelling. And so we had to talk about this to come to an understanding that even when I became serious like this, okay, we need to talk about this, I didn't see that as yelling. But for him, the impact was so much stronger. He understood that as yelling. Intent does not equal impact. We hurt each other in ways we don't understand because we make assumptions. The ouch project could go a long way to truly building what we think of as beloved community. And that leads us into learning how to be in conflict a little better. Recognizing that, of course, we have different opinions. We say we welcome differences, and differences lead to conflict if we haven't learned how to work with differences. So we cannot say we welcome differences and then not practice how to be in disagreement and how to approach conflict, de-escalate conflict, use conflict, and grow out of conflict having learned something. We need to be able to establish a baseline where we trust that if we're in conflict, it is not to harm or take down the other person, but it is to share our differences to find some more common ground. But if we can't trust that that's what we're doing, we will all each take conflict personally and simply try to defend ourselves. We need to see it modeled. We need to practice it. We need to review what happened. We need to come to agreements. We need to practice. We need to practice. We need to practice how to be with each other when our differences come up against one another. How to do conflict well. And I think the one other thing I want to talk about as a way to help us build skills, to build beloved community, is to begin to be more aware of the social nature of our interactions, which depends on or is fueled by what I will call busybodiness, talking about other people, talking about each other, talking about other people when you're not with those people, telling other people. In some of the circles that we form, chalice groups and things like that, we say explicitly, what happens in this circle stays in this circle. We are building trust to tell each other what's most important to us. And a story that I tell is not someone else's story to tell. And I think we understand that deeply. And still, in the life of a congregation, we spend lots of time talking about each other. Now, we could spend that time talking about each other, just continually lifting up other people, but we don't quite do that yet. I mean, that's not something that we have practiced. So how we think about, talk about others, the extent to which talking about or thinking about other people's situations and problems keeps us from looking at or dealing with or accepting or working on our own, that's such a human tendency. As long as I can work on someone else's or have opinions about someone else, it's easier for me to not have time to work on my own. In a truly beloved community, I think we are helping each other work on our own needs and issues with support, with acceptance, with trust, without judging. These are all things that the society that we have grown up in has not helped us deal with, learn, and practice. And so we set our congregations up as an ideal place to practice these things, which they can be, but we need to be explicit that those are the things we are going to work on together. How to build a beloved community. If we can practice some of these things, if we can become more comfortable learning from each other and with each other the ways that we can improve, if we can become more comfortable affirming each other, if we can become more comfortable learning to listen with real curiosity and not with a need to know about other people so that we can work on other people's stuff. If we can establish a baseline of that kind of common concern for the goodwill of all, what a real covenant would be made of. Concern, true concern for the well-being of all. Even if we could only get to the point where we say that's our aim and we try, that may be the best we can do. But if we do that, it will make a difference. It does make a difference. In their beautiful essay about community, Alandria Williams wrote that we are the children of freedom fighters, visionaries, and radical liberal theologians. We are the phoenix rising out of the ashes of the McCarthy era and civil rights and women's and queer liberation movements. We are the survivors and beneficiaries of youth-led and youth-focused beliefs and programming that encouraged us to be change makers, boundary pushers, and institutionalists at the same time. We are the descendants of, we are the recipients of so much work toward beloved community that has been done in our line by our ancestors. And we are living in the here and now, called by a world which none of us could have imagined arriving in, called in a time of huge peril and incredible possibility. The beloved community is not something to wish for, to simply talk about, to philosophize about. The beloved community is something that we can only live into, action by action, day by day. One of the poems that was written about the time of the inauguration by another youth poet was this poem titled "To Rebuild" by Hallie Knight. I share it in closing. The house was built brick by brick, pane by pane, initially withstanding winds, the force of a hurricane. But over time, the faults are found as storm after storm assails, the craftsmanship outdated, in need of reform. The windows break one by one under the weight of wrongs. The structure strains until one day fire catches and only the foundation of good intentions remains. While easiest would be to walk, to abandon, moving on to rebuild, the value is seen by those who have called it home, desires to be fulfilled, remembering the mistakes, maintaining the hope of freedom. Hand in hand we work, entering a new season. The work is not complete until the walls protect all who live there, no exceptions. Abandonment of all unnecessary despair. A job led by all, not by one. We work long days, turning long nights, the creation of our hands proving more than surface level acknowledgement of rights. The past is not buried, but underlies what we have transformed before our eyes. May we be these workers and these builders of beloved community so that someday we may know what it really is to live that way. May it be so.
You probably know that starting last month, we have decided to give the plate away to one organization every Sunday of the month. And this month, February, it will be given to Lane County Mutual Aid, which works from a belief in abundance, class solidarity, anti-racism, disability justice, striving for collective liberation. The Lane County Mutual Aid provides material support to people in need because of the pandemic, because of the wildfires, focusing half of their resources on Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Our offerings will be sent to the NAACP to support this effort. So while Kat, I'm asking you to put up the slide for what we usually have up for the offering. Again, please open up the chat so you can share your joys and sorrows. Suzanne? May the offerings that you have given be transformed, that lives may be transformed.
And now we extinguish our chalice. We extinguish our chalice and we pause to listen. The world calls us to learn, to grow, to change, to act. May we be encouraged by our time together and go back out into the world, ready to take one more step, learn one more thing, take one more risk to make the world a better place for all until we gather again. Go in peace.